On that grey morning in Greenwich, the sound of birds was drowned out by the sepulchral silence of the Alcott mansion. Outside, imported cars slept under blankets of fog. Inside, only the faint sound of the damp cloth sliding over the marble echoed through the cold corridors. It was Linda who held him, calloused hands, short nails, and the navy blue uniform that already bore the marks of work even before noon. No one noticed her entering. No one said, "Good morning," but she saw it all. He saw the golden portraits on the walls, the imposing furniture, the Swiss watch that seemed to mock the time that did not pass. Upstairs, two blond boys peered silently, like ghosts of flesh and blood. They didn't speak, don't smile. They did not exist in the eyes of those who passed by. But Linda saw them, and something inside her also fell silent. How many women have stepped into houses like this and swallowed their own pain in exchange for a salary? How many were invisible even when they healed wounds that no money knew how to reach? This is the story of a simple woman who changed everything with a silent gesture. If you've ever believed that love can break through walls, get ready, because what happened there, no one could ever imagine. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. The moment Ethan ran toward that woman in the simple uniform and called her Mama wasn't just moving. It was a cry of the soul, a crack in the silence that had protected secrets for generations. That sound, that single word, made time stop, and no one there, not the nannies, not the father, not even Linda herself, could have imagined that all of this was linked to an old photo, forgotten in a dusty basement, and to a past forcibly buried. Something happened there that cannot be explained with logic alone. And if you are here, it is because perhaps you also believe that love, pain, and memory can cross even the deepest silence. If this story touches somewhere in your heart, if you have ever felt that you have been ignored, even though you do everything with love, leave your support. A like, a comment, a subscription. Sometimes they are just numbers for some, but for those who tell stories like this, they are signs that there are people feeling together. And today, more than ever, Linda needs someone to feel with her, because what's next changes everything. The taxi stopped in front of the wrought iron gates, as if stopping in front of a palace of silence. The morning was cold, shrouded in a mist that covered even the bare branches of the trees surrounding the Alcott mansion. Linda descended with restrained steps, holding with both hands a simple backpack, already worn out on the straps. Around his neck hung the plastic badge handed out by the agency. Linda Coleman, General Services. She adjusted the scarf in her hair and took a deep breath, feeling the cold air cut through her nostrils, mixed with the damp smell of freshly cut grass and old wood. The front door was opened before she rang the doorbell. The one waiting for her was Mrs. Chapman, upright posture, austere expression, starched clothes to the core. "Be punctual, avoid conversation, and never touch children," the housekeeper said, without even a welcome wave. Linda just nodded, as if she already knew her place. She followed the woman's firm steps through the main entrance and was enveloped by a cold grandeur. Marble columns, oriental carpets, crystal chandeliers. But what caught his attention the most was the silence. It was a different silence. Not the silence of respect or peace. It was the kind of silence that screams. Chapman pointed to the rooms with his finger, emotionless. Living room, library, children's wing. Prohibited. Linda did not answer. His gaze scanned the overclean furniture, the artificial flowers in the silver vases, and the smiling portraits in gilded frames that seemed to mock the pain that hung in the air. As they crossed the corridor that led to the back, they heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Two boys, identical, blonde, big eyes, porcelain faces. They stopped at the last step and stared at Linda. She stopped too. For a moment there was no one else there, just her and those two pairs of scared eyes. "Don't worry, they don't talk," Chapman said, with an icy half-smile. "And they won't talk, not since the accident." Linda looked away respectfully, but inside her something stirred. There was something in the eyes of those boys that she recognized. It was not fear, it was absence. An absence so deep that it seemed to have roots in the body. The kitchen was spacious with impeccable white tiles. Two nannies were preparing a snack, talking in a low voice. When Linda entered, silence was changed again. The eldest whispered, as if telling an ancient secret. Their mother fell down the stairs. No one knows if he stumbled or... The other interrupted her with a look. Linda just took the bucket and started cleaning. Damp cloth, circular motion, smell of vinegar with lemon. The same routine as always, but the weight there was different. The ground seemed to hurt under his feet. As he swept the corridor that connected to the bedroom wing, he passed the boys again. They were sitting side by side on a wooden bench, one with an open book, the other drawing. They did not look up, but Linda felt it. He felt as if someone had touched his heart with the cold finger of loneliness. On the first night, she slept in a small room at the back of the house. There was a small window overlooking the mist-covered garden. She lay down dressed, as she did whenever the world did not seem safe. She hugged an old piece of clothing, the only memory of her husband, and cried softly, not for the place, not for work, but because I recognized that kind of silence. In life there are pains that do not make noise. There are absences that no one sees. And there are people who pass through places without being noticed, but who feel everything, absolutely everything, with their hearts exposed. If you've ever gone somewhere and felt that sadness lived there before you, leave it here in the comments. I felt it. I've lived it. It touched me. Because sometimes what saves us is knowing that we are not alone in this invisible pain. The next morning, when he went downstairs to begin the service, he found the twins in the garden. Ethan was holding a broken toy. Elijah watched the flowers as if waiting for something. Linda bent down, began to sweep the leaves, and without saying a word, quietly hummed the melody her grandmother taught her in Alabama. Swing low, sweet chariot. The boys looked up, and in that brief instant, between the sound of the broom and the murmur of the song, something happened, something that no one expected, something that not even Linda herself could explain. I wonder what was in that song, in that voice, in that woman forgotten by life that awakened the eyes of two children lost in silence. At the Alcott mansion, the days always seemed the same, but for Linda, nothing was ordinary. The routine began early, before the sun fully rose, and even wrapped in luxury, that house exuded a sadness that no kind of wealth could disguise. Richard Alcott rarely left the office on the second floor. He spent hours in front of screens and folders, with the rigid face of someone who got lost in his own pain. The servants called him Mr. Alcott, cautiously, as if even his name weighed too much. He spoke little with everyone, especially with the children. Ethan and Elijah lived in a wing, decorated with soft tones, expensive toys, imported stuffed animals, hardcover books. But even with all this care, the room looked more like a museum than a children's space. There was no laughter, no shouts of joy, no noise of running footsteps. There was silence, dense silence. The two boys spent the hours drawing in silence or assembling puzzles that they never finished. They communicated with each other with looks, touches on the arms, small gestures with their hands. When one got up, the other followed, as if they were a single soul, divided into two bodies, wandering among the rooms of the house. Linda gently cleaned every corner of that place, but her eyes were always attentive. He watched as the boys avoided the east corridor, the same one that led to the stairs where their mother had fallen. Nobody talked about it. It was as if that part of the house was haunted by something stronger than any memory, guilt. One day, while vacuuming upstairs, Linda noticed that one of the paintings on the wall had been turned backwards, stopped. He put the vacuum cleaner on silent mode and came closer. It was a large, gold-framed portrait like the others, but this one showed Caroline Alcott smiling with the twins on her lap. The image was facing the wall as if someone at some point could not bear to look at it anymore. Linda felt a tightness in her chest. With his fingers full of dust, he turned the photo back over and wiped the glass surface with the hem of his apron. The woman's eyes seemed alive, as if they were observing everything from wherever they were. At the end of the corridor he heard a noise. When he turned, there they were, Ethan and Elijah, sitting on the steps of the spiral staircase that connected to the attic. They said nothing as usual, but there was something in their eyes, a curious glow, or maybe recognition. Linda, with the broom in her hands, just looked back. For seconds too long, they stood there, motionless, as if that silent exchange was more than a chance encounter. She smiled, shy. But the boys got up and walked away, with light steps like shadows. Time passed slowly in the following days. Linda began to notice patterns. The twins never looked directly into the eyes of the adults, except when she was around. When the other employees spoke to them, they lowered their faces, cringed. But with her, they were silent. Yes, but a different silence, an attentive silence. It was as if they were listening inside. They perceived his presence. They accompanied her discreetly, sitting close to her while she cleaned windows or watered the plants. They didn't speak, don't smile, but they were there. During breakfast, Linda stood away from the table while the nanny served pancakes with organic syrup. Ethan let the spoon slip to the floor. Before the nanny bent down, Linda had already picked up, cleaned up, and returned with a smile. Ethan held the spoon as if it were a precious thing. Elijah watched, unblinking. Chapman saw the scene from the hallway, his brow furrowed and his lips pursed. But he said nothing. He just wrote it down in silence, as if collecting crumbs for a trial that is yet to come. At the end of the afternoon, Linda mopped the floor of the main room, on her knees, as she had done since she was 14. The floor was clean, but she liked to leave the work impeccable. With each movement of his arm, he remembered his mother saying, "When the world doesn't see you, daughter, that's where you shine the most. It glows in silence." She didn't know why that phrase came back to mind so much in that house, but he came back, and it hurt. In the library, the boys drew. As she left, Linda noticed that one of them had forgotten a sheet of paper on the chair. As he approached, he felt his heart tighten. It was a simple drawing, made with crayons. 2 boys holding hands, and next to them, a black woman in a blue apron, with a huge smile on her face. Linda put her hand to her mouth. He felt the air faint. That drawing was not just a doodle. It was a memory that shouldn't even exist. Or was it a wish? A memory that wasn't even hers, but that hurt as if it were. He sat on the floor, still holding the paper. His hands trembled. Inside, she felt as if she had been pulled into a labyrinth that was not hers. But somehow, he had been waiting for her for a long time. Who were those boys, in fact? And why did they seem so familiarly attached to a woman like her, poor, black, invisible? Linda looked up slowly, feeling a shiver go up her spine. At the top of the stairs, Ethan was standing, staring at her, and in your hand, it was the same broken toy from days ago. He held her tightly, and in the eyes, there was something different, as if something was about to happen, something that could change everything. The damp cloth glided calmly over the tall, stained glass windows of the living room, spreading the subtle smell of lavender with white vinegar. Morning light blew through the colored glass, drawing stains of blue and amber on the polished floor. Linda cleaned in silence, standing on a small ladder, focused on the details, as she had done since she had learned to see beauty even in what others ignored. Her shoulders moved in the same rhythm as the song that echoed inside her, a stuck song which had not yet come out of her mouth until that moment. She felt it before she heard it, a chill, a presence. Then he slowly turned his face and saw Ethan was there, standing very close, small, thin, eyes fixed on her. He made no sound, did not smile, did not move. I just stared, with the kind of look that goes through the skin. Linda was not scared. He took a deep breath, and as if responding to an old call, he began to sing. The melody was born in his throat in a soft way, almost like a whisper. Swing low, sweet chariot. The sound filled the space like a balm. The song that her mother sang when life was tight, that her grandmother sang on morning days in the alleys of Alabama. It wasn't just a song, it was a prayer. Ethan didn't move. He remained there silently, as if he were listening to a story he already knew, but had forgotten. Linda continued, "Comin' for to carry me home?" The notes spread in the air like invisible veils, caressing the corners of the house. Even the hands of the large clock on the wall seemed to slow down. When the last note dissipated, Linda lowered the cloth and looked at the boy. Her chest was pounding. She felt something she couldn't explain, as if the threads of time were being sewn there, right in front of her. Ethan then took a step. Slowly, he grasped the hem of Linda's apron with his small, cold hand. He said nothing, but he leaned against her with his forehead in a timid gesture, almost broken. Linda didn't move. He stood there, feeling that silent touch say everything the boy could not yet do. At the top of the stairs, Elijah watched everything. With wide eyes, he didn't seem scared, but yes, curious, or perhaps relieved. Mrs. Chapman, standing at the door of the hallway, watched the scene with a pinch in her eyes. Her hands crossed in front of her body, her thin lips trembling. She didn't like that kind of thing. People like Linda, she said behind the doors, must know their own place. And her place was never with the children. But there they were. Ethan, with his head against Linda's belly, and Linda with her soul pierced by an emotion she couldn't name. She ran her hand through the boy's hair carefully, like someone holding an injured bird. She felt like crying, but she held back. It was not time. Not even a place. After a while, Ethan walked away. Slowly, without saying a word, he returned upstairs. But before he disappeared down the stairs, he looked back, and for a split second, smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile. But that lit something inside her like one candle lights another. Linda put her hand to her chest, tightening her apron. He felt his heart beat in a way that hadn't beaten in years. Something profound was happening. She knew. And it wasn't just about sadness or grief. It was as if he was rediscovering a history he had never lived. At the end of the hallway, Chapman was still watching her silently, like a shadow about to move. There was something in his eyes that mixed fear and resentment, and a question that hovered between the walls of the mansion. What was that cleaning lady awakening there, that no one else could? The lunch table was set to perfection. White crockery with gold details, napkins folded like small sculptures, crystal glasses lined up like soldiers in a position of respect. But the air in the room was tense, dense, as if something invisible hovered between the chairs. The two nannies tried in vain to get the twins to eat. Elijah played with his spoon, pushing breadcrumbs as if they were pieces of a game. Ethan stared at the plate, unblinking, as if he were facing something that scared him. "Come on, Ethan. Just a little spoon, please," whispered the younger nanny, kneeling next to him. But the boys remained motionless, oblivious to the effort around them. The food cooled, time passed, and nothing changed. Linda watched from afar, sitting on a narrow bench near the wall, as if she knows that her place is not at the table. He had his hands on his lap, breathing calmly, trying not to interfere. But I felt a lump in my throat. He didn't know if it was pity, pain, or a deeper, older, more hers feeling. And when this feeling grew too much, it escaped through the mouth, without asking permission. He began to sing softly, almost a whisper. "Swing low, sweet chariot." The melody danced lightly in the air, as if it knew the exact path to the boys' hearts. Linda didn't look at them. He didn't sing to get attention. It was as if she were talking to herself, to her story, to what sustained her in the days when everything seemed to fall apart. It was then that it happened. Elijah dropped the spoon. A dry sound echoed in the room. Everyone stopped. Ethan let out a sound, a syllable cut off. Something between a sigh and a ma. The nannies looked at each other in shock. "Did he speak?" one of them murmured, her voice breaking. "Did you hear that?" Linda stopped singing without moving. Her heart raced. She didn't dare look at the boys. He was afraid of breaking the spell. One of the nannies ran down the hallway. Seconds later, Mr. Alcott appeared at the door of the dining room. Serious face, dark eyes, impeccable clothes, as always. He didn't say anything. I just watched. The children were seated, as always, but something in the air was different. "What's going on?" he asked, not taking his eyes off Ethan. "They reacted. The boy tried to talk," said the nanny, still in disbelief. "And it was when she was singing." Alcott looked at Linda, as if he saw her for the first time. His eyes carried no emotion, but a kind of suspicious curiosity, as if he was trying to understand what kind of trick this was. Chapman arrived soon after, hurriedly, stiff footsteps on the wooden floor. He crossed his arms, stared at Linda coldly. "What did you do with the boys?" he asked, his voice laden with venom under the layer of politeness. Linda stood up slowly. He looked into Chapman's eyes calmly. "I just sang an old song from when I was little." "And why did you sing during lunch?" "Because it hurt in here," he replied, putting his hand to his chest. The housekeeper pursed her lips. Alcott remained silent, his eyes fixed on his children. Ethan now moved his fingers on the tabletop. Elijah drummed with his fingernail in the glass. They were small movements, but new, alive. Linda remained still, feeling the gazes on her. I didn't like that. I didn't want to be at the center of anything. I just wanted to understand what was going on inside her and inside those boys. That night, he returned to the back room with his body exhausted, but his mind in turmoil. I was afraid. I didn't know if I had crossed an invisible line, but something inside her also lit up. He sat on the edge of the bed, his feet still on, his handkerchief in his hair damp with sweat, and he took a deep breath. Once, 2, 3. She followed in silence, carrying that weight that no one saw. The feeling of doing something right and at the same time dangerous. One misstep and she could be sent away. One step further. And perhaps he found there a meaning that he had been looking for years. If you are following this story now, feeling touched by all this, leave a like and subscribe. It is the most beautiful way to show that this pain has not gone unnoticed. The next morning, Chapman didn't address a word to her. But the atmosphere in the house had changed. The nannies whispered. Mr. Alcott passed through the kitchen and, without looking at anyone, said only, "Keep that song discreet." It was the first time he spoke directly to Linda. She just nodded. He went back to work, but inside a question hammered. Why did that music, that ancestral melody, provoke such deep reactions in the boys? And so much discomfort in adults? The playroom was the only place in the house that didn't seem to know that time had stopped. There were dolls arranged on shelves, building blocks scattered in colorful boxes, children's books with the spines worn by old use, and a soft light coming in through the window, warming the soft carpet. Linda was on her knees, carefully rearranging the toys. His fingers slid across the pages of an old book with vibrant illustrations of African tales, stories of ebony kings, talking animals, weeping trees and women singing to calm the winds. She smiled as she remembered her mother reading to her on an old mattress in the back of the small Bronx apartment, where the light came more from the words than from the window. As he cleaned, he heard light footsteps behind him. He didn't have to turn around. He knew who he was. Ethan entered slowly, without announcing his presence. He stopped a few meters away, watching. Linda didn't break the silence, just sat on the floor, crossing her legs slowly, as if inviting someone to a safe place. "Do you like this one?" he asked quietly, showing the book with the illustration of a turtle with golden braids. Ethan was silent for a few seconds. His eyes swept over the drawing, then Linda's face. His breathing was restrained, but his body moved closer, as if each step was guided by something beyond logic. Then, with a hoarse, choked voice, he whispered, "Mama." The world stopped. Linda felt the blood disappear from her extremities. He stood still, as if time itself had held his breath. Tears came without warning, running silently down his face. It wasn't just a word. It was a calling. It was an echo. And it was a touch on wounds that she didn't even know were still bleeding. Right behind, Elijah appeared at the door. He looked at the scene, his eyes wide, his chin trembling. He approached slowly, without stepping on the toys. He stood beside his brother and, in a sweet, low but firm voice, said, "Sing!" Again. Linda put her hand to her mouth. A sob escaped. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. But it was impossible. Those boys, silent for years, now called out to her. They asked for his voice, his sound, his presence. The nannies heard the noise and ran. They stopped at the door, not believing what they saw. One of them covered her mouth with her hand. The other dropped the glass on the floor, which shattered, but no one reacted. Mr. Alcott appeared seconds later. He was without his jacket, his tie loosened, as if he had been torn off a meeting. His eyes wandered between his children and Linda. She saw Ethan leaning against her arm. She saw Elijah with the book in his hands, smiling for the first time in 3 years. "What?" he began, but his voice failed. Linda sat still in shock, her face wet. He looked at the boss, then at the boys. There was no explanation. I didn't know what to say. The boys cringed when they saw their father. Ethan held the hem of Linda's blouse tightly. Elijah took a step back. It was then that Linda understood. They said, but not in the presence of just anyone, only hers. Chapman arrived soon after, his eyes sparkling. "What's going on here?" What was that? No one answered. The silence that was once a prison was now a shield. Richard Alcott walked slowly to his children, but they pulled away, as if they were about to disappear again if they were touched. And it was at that moment that doubt grew in everyone there. What existed between that black, humble, invisible woman? What about the children of a powerful white millionaire? Why was it that only she could break their silence? And what did that mama really mean? Because perhaps that word hid much more than anyone there could have imagined. That house, which was previously made of silence, now breathed another frequency. It wasn't noise, it wasn't racket, it was life. The hallways seemed less cold. The twins' footsteps, once erased, now echoed across the wooden floor as signs of rebirth. Ethan and Elijah followed Linda everywhere, like two cubs chasing the only figure that offered warmth in a world of marble and rigidity. If she washed the windows, they watched. If he watered the plants, they imitated his gestures. If she hummed, they closed their eyes as if they were cradled by an invisible lap. But with the light came the shadow. Whispers began among the employees, first in disguise, then wide open. In the kitchen, Linda heard as she approached. "She must have done something. This is very strange." These boys never spoke. Now, all of a sudden, this woman appeared out of nowhere and now acts like family. Mrs. Chapman called a private meeting with Mr. Alcott in the second-floor office. The door closed, but the old walls of the mansion did not completely drown out the poison-laden words. "I told you so, Mr. Alcott. This woman, it can be dangerous. The boys are vulnerable, and she, with this quiet way, disguises it well. But no one knows where it came from. It appeared out of nowhere. It has no strong references, and look at the effect it has on them. This is not normal." Richard kept his face impassive, but his fingers drummed the table. "Are you saying she's manipulating my children?" "I'm saying that she may be using some strategy. It can be emotional. It can be spiritual. Maybe." "The boys have spoken, Chapman, for the first time in years. That's a fact. Precisely for this reason we need to be suspicious. Pain can be a door to anything, even for deception." In the kitchen, the older nanny, with grey hair tied in a bun, heard the insinuations in the background and slammed the wooden spoon the table. "Enough. You can find whatever you want. But I saw with those eyes what that woman did. She didn't force anything. He didn't ask for anything. It was just there. And for the first time, those boys breathed again. No one answered, but the mood has turned sour. At lunchtime, one of the white maids refused to sit at the table next to Linda. He got up with his plate and went to eat, standing in the corner, as a mute protest. Linda said nothing. She just gathered her own plate, ate slowly, in silence, and washed the dishes as she always did. His eyes did not seek approval. His soul already knew too much about rejection. When he went out to vacuum the library carpet, Ethan and Elijah were lying on the floor, flipping through a book. When they saw her, they smiled with their eyes. Ethan pointed to a page and whispered, "She sings here, just like you." Linda knelt down, and they approached, leaning their body against hers. They were too small to carry so much silence, but they were starting to deliver the pieces, and they gave it to her. It's this kind of story that we need to pay attention to, because sometimes those who came just to clean the house end up cleaning wounds that no one else had the courage to touch. And if you think this was once strong, it's because you haven't seen what this story holds deep inside. In the late afternoon, Chapman passed Linda in the hallway, and with his face closed, said, "You have been too close to the children. Remember that you are here to cleanse, not to educate." Linda held the bucket of water firmly. He felt the humiliation rise through his chest, but he replied calmly, "I only listen when they want to talk." Chapman did not respond. He just walked to the bedroom wing with stiff steps. Richard Alcott from the top of the stairs saw the scene. He said nothing. But the eyes, once cold, now carried doubt, and an old fear, the fear that something outside of your control was growing there, and perhaps transforming everything. But what he didn't know yet, it's just that the biggest secret of that house was much closer to coming to light than anyone imagined, and that the key to everything was where they least expected it. Sunday dawned, shrouded in mist, as if the sky wanted to hide the secrets that house seemed to hold for so long. The halls were empty, the sound of Linda's footsteps echoing like whispers in an abandoned cathedral. The Alcott mansion, so full of rules and looks during the week, now seemed asleep, and it was precisely in these silences that the truth liked to reveal itself. With the informal permission to clean the basement, Linda put on her rubber gloves, fastened her scarf to her hair, and walked down the narrow staircase, where the smell of mold and old wood mingled with the biting cold of forgotten memories. It was a place where no one entered, not even the nannies, not Chapman, not the owners themselves. Downstairs, the light was dim, and the furniture covered with white sheets looked like ghosts from a previous life. She began to sweep calmly, brushing away boxes and bags of fabric. An old closet creaked when it was opened, revealing yellowed papers, old toys, photo albums, and a porcelain doll with cracked eyes. Among all that, a wooden box with a metal clasp caught his eye. It was dusty but intact. As she opened it, Linda felt time slip through her fingers. There were letters, birthday cards, newspaper clippings, and a small stack of old photographs. Photos that, at first glance, seemed ordinary. Family parties, picnics, elegant Christmases. But in one of them, something made her stop. It was a black and white image, faded by time, showing a little blonde girl, whom Linda recognized immediately as Caroline Alcott, Richard's deceased wife, smiling and holding the hand of a black woman. Linda took the photo closer to the light. His heart raced. That woman, it was like looking in the mirror. The same nose, the same contour of the face, the sunken but bright eyes. It could not be a coincidence. He turned the photo with trembling hands. On the back, written in pen, "To Caroline, from L." A shiver ran down his spine. Would it be his mother? Your grandmother? The initial was the same. The skin, goosebumps, the stomach turning. She sat on the step of the stairs, holding the photo with both hands, as if it were a piece of herself that had been torn out and stored there for decades. Time seemed suspended. The basement was suddenly no longer just a dark room. It was now a tomb of secrets, and she was digging up a past that no one ever thought would return. And it's in this kind of moment that the chest tightens in a different way, when we discover that maybe we have always been part of a story that we were never told. Who has never felt this way? Forgotten, but at the same time, strangely connected to something bigger. If this has crossed you too, comment here. I understand. I've been there. I was moved. These words touch more than you might think. Linda took a deep breath. He looked at the picture again. I needed to find out who that woman was. She needed to understand why Caroline, as a girl, seemed so close to her history, to her skin, to her origin. There was something there, an ancient tie. He closed the box carefully, put the photograph in the inside pocket of his jacket, and climbed the stairs with light steps. His heart was beating fast, but his face was serene. She knew what she needed to do. In the main hallway, one of the hanging photos, the one of Caroline and Richard's wedding, drew attention for a previously unnoticed detail. All the portraits were lined up except one. The picture frame that was over the fireplace was facing down, as if someone wanted to hide that image from the world. Linda, in an almost involuntary gesture, lifted him up. In the photo, Caroline was smiling with the white veil in the wind, but in the background, the same woman in the basement photo appeared in the background, almost out of focus, as if it were always there, invisible, but present. Linda swallowed. The questions could no longer be ignored, because if that woman was really part of his lineage, what else was that mansion hiding? And why hasn't anyone ever talked about it? The attic of the Alcott mansion was the place where time seemed to have been locked away with the dust. The ladder creaked beneath Linda's feet as she climbed, guided only by the dim light that leaked through the cracks in the old woodwork. The air there was drier, with the smell of old paper and forgotten wood. Pieces of childhood, family secrets and muffled memories piled up in boxes labeled with dates, names and acronyms, almost erased. She followed in silence, cloth in her hands, but her eyes attentive. He didn't know exactly why he had gone up there. Mrs. Chapman had mentioned a few days before that this part of the house needed no cleaning, but it was precisely this warning that ignited something inside her. Sometimes what no one wants to clean is what needs to be seen the most. In the right corner of the attic, under a beige blanket, was a wooden chest with fine carvings on the edges. CA's initials, Caroline Alcott, were engraved on the front, accompanied by a small metal lock that had already rusted. Linda picked up a key that was loose on the nearby floor, and in a dry crack, the trunk opened. Inside, carefully organized, were dozens of letters, tied with ribbons of aged fabric. As I unrolled the first bundle, the smell of ancient perfume rose into the air, lavender and vanilla, with a hint of sweetness reminiscent of afternoons on someone's lap. The letters were from Caroline, written in a childish handwriting at the beginning, and, little by little, more mature, but they were not addressed to the mother or the father. They all had the same recipient, Lorraine. Linda flipped through carefully, as if invading someone else's diary. Caroline's words were intimate, lively, tender. "Lorraine, today Dad yelled at me again, but you let me sleep on your lap and combed my hair like Mom did, only with more affection. Lorraine, you're the only one who sings for me. When you sing that song, I dream of angels. Swing low, sweet chariot. My favorite song, remember? Lorraine, why do they say you have to sleep in the back? I wanted you to sleep with me. I love you more than anything." Linda's tears fell on the paper. That soft, innocent lyric revealed a deep love between the white girl heiress of the mansion and a black woman who, most likely, was the one who really raised her. Lorraine. That name sounded like a forgotten prayer. And that song, the same one Linda sang without knowing why, was the link between them. Suddenly the pieces began to move inside Linda's mind. Lorraine could be his grandmother, or even her mother, in a youth she never knew. The connection with the boys, Ethan's eyes when she sang, it wasn't just emotion, it was memory. It was a noose. It was history. As she came down from the attic, her heart still in a trance, Linda was surprised in the hallway by Chapman. The housekeeper was standing there, arms folded, looking cold as the Connecticut winter. "You were poking around where you shouldn't, weren't you?" he said in a cutting voice. "Messing with what doesn't belong to you." Linda kept her gaze steady but said nothing. He still held the last letter, folded discreetly inside his apron pocket. "You can fool Mr. Alcott with that quiet way. But I know what you are," Chapman continued, approaching. "You always think you can walk in the back door and sit on the couch in the living room." The phrase was suspended in the air, dirty with prejudice. Linda did not answer. It wasn't worth it, but his body trembled inside, not of fear, but of something stronger. Sometimes the silence of a black woman is mistaken for submission, but behind it there is a whole world of hushed-up stories, inherited pains and truths that one day need to breathe, and when they finally come to light, nothing is ever the same again. Chapman turned his back and disappeared down the hallway, leaving behind him a trail of veiled hatred. But Linda didn't bow. He returned to his room with a firm step and a burning heart. The letter in his pocket burned, as if it had a life of its own. She knew this was just the beginning, because if Lorraine was who she was beginning to imagine, what else had that family buried along with their secrets? The nights at the Alcott mansion had a thick, almost spiritual silence, and it was in this silence that the dreams began. Linda, lying in the small back room, always woke up with the same feeling. There was someone there, calling for her, not with harsh words, but with a voice of longing. It was always the same woman, dark skin, a steady gaze, and hands that caressed the hair of a white child. Her voice pierced her dreams like an old chant, "Swing low, sweet chariot." And all of a sudden, she would look at Linda and say, "Hope, my hope." At first, Linda thought it was just emotional memory, some childhood memory, perhaps confused with the pains of recent days. But the dreams continued. They repeated the same smells, the same songs, the same name, Hope. That was not just a dream. He was called. On Friday morning, while washing the breakfast dishes, Linda made a decision. He asked Mr. Alcott for a brief break, alleging a personal matter in New York. He hesitated but nodded. Chapman rolled his eyes. The twins, upon hearing that she was going to leave, became agitated, clinging to her legs. Ethan cried. Elijah was silent. Linda promised that she would return soon. He took the train to Harlem, a neighborhood where history breathes through the walls. The graffiti told of struggles, and the corners kept memories of entire generations. At 238 139th Street, there was a two-story house with peeling paint and dried ferns in the window. There lived Anita Reynolds, an old neighbor of the house where Lorraine, Linda's grandmother, had been a nanny for 4 decades. "I thought no one else remembered her," Anita said, after letting Linda in. Lorraine was a fortress, thin, polite, but with fire inside. He raised the girl Caroline as if she were his daughter. Linda listened in silence, her eyes shining. "I remember her singing every night. Her voice filled the block. The girl couldn't sleep without hearing 'Swing low, sweet chariot.' But one day, everything changed." "How did it change?" Linda asked. "Out of nowhere. The Alcott family fired Lorraine without explanation. She returned to the Bronx, destroyed. He never wanted to sing again. He died early, broken heart, if you will." Linda felt a knot in her chest. It was as if time had come full circle, linking her memories to those of a woman she had never met, but who somehow lived in her. On the way out, Anita handed over an old photograph, folded and worn. It was Caroline as a child on Lorraine's lap. The look of both was of a love without shame, without distance, without color. Back on the train, with the city passing through the window, Linda cried softly. That wasn't just about the past. It was about a cycle that needed to be closed. A link between two women who loved, were torn away and silenced by the same structure. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Back at the mansion, the night arrived with a different weight. Linda entered the room, her shoes still covered in Harlem dust, and looked at the sleeping boys. Elijah hugged a teddy bear, and Ethan muttered under his breath, as if dreaming too. She sat on the edge of the bed and began to sing, her voice breaking. "Swing low, sweet chariot." And it was at that exact moment that one of the lights in the corridor flashed and went out. Linda looked up slowly, and for a second, just one, he swore to see reflected in the mirror of the dressing table the silhouette of the woman of his dreams, Lorraine. She was there, or maybe had never left. But why now? Why at that moment? And what did that apparition want to show? The morning began with phones ringing non-stop, hurried voices in the hallways, and stiff footsteps up and down the stairs of the mansion. The silence of the twins was replaced by a corporate noise that invaded until the last room. Richard Alcott, who had been lingering in the presence of his children for weeks, seemed to have been dragged back into a world where figures were worth more than feelings. In the office, the screens flashed red reports. Jonathan Moore, the majority shareholder of the holding company Alcott and Moore, called from the office building in Manhattan, demanding answers. "You need to get back in the game, Richard. Shareholders are impatient, and honestly, what has been happening in this house is becoming a joke behind the scenes." Moore's voice was rough, harsh, cutting. "My children are—" Richard tried to justify. "Your children have always been the responsibility of the nannies. You are the CEO. That's what the council needs, not a widower obsessed with a cleaning lady." The phrase hung in the air like poison. Chapman, always in the shadows, walked through the door with a report in his hands and a look that said more than any words. "Mr. Alcott, maybe he's right. This woman is changing everything, and not always for the better." Richard did not answer. He just lowered his eyes. There was a war going on inside him. On the one hand, the cold logic of business. On the other, the silent warmth of Linda's presence. Over the next few days, Linda began to notice the changes. Richard's gaze no longer sought her. The brief conversations in the hallway ceased. The hands that had previously held those of their children carefully now went back to hiding in the pockets of their jackets. Ethan and Elijah felt it, as if their world had taken 2 steps back. Elijah stopped uttering any words. Ethan, in the early hours, began to cry, not loudly but with suppressed sobs, as if he didn't want to bother. Linda watched everything with the attentive eyes of someone who has seen this movie before. When power calls, feelings recede. That night, alone in the utility room, Linda knelt on the cold floor. There were no pillows, no lighted candles, just the sound of the wind hitting the window and the smell of the cloth still damp from disinfectant. She crossed her fingers and prayed. "Sir, I don't know why I ended up here, but if there is a purpose, it gives me the strength not to give up. Show me the way. Help me not to erase." And that's when we understand that sometimes the world makes a point of forgetting who serves, who cares, who loves in silence. But heaven never forgets. And if you're feeling it along with me right now, stay, because this story still has a lot of truth to show. Upstairs, Ethan had drawn with crayons a torn piece of paper hidden under his pillow. In the center, he had scribbled the figure of a woman holding 2 boys by the hands. Above her head, a yellow halo. The next morning, Linda found the drawing while tidying up her room. Her heart tightened. She didn't know that, even in silence, the boys were screaming inside. But what she didn't know yet was that something even stronger was about to be taken from her. Because when goodness begins to shine too much, the world tries to extinguish it with all its might. What else would Linda still have to lose to understand the size of her purpose? The day was cloudy, and the mansion looked even colder than usual. The tall windows let through a grey, tired light, as if even the sky were in mourning for something that no one there could name. Linda had been sent to Caroline's old office for a simple task: reorganizing the cabinets and disposing of old papers. Chapman, in his usual harsh tone, handed over the key and said only, "Clean it up, Mr. Alcott wants to turn this room into a boardroom." As she entered, Linda stopped. The room smelled of aged paper, dormant perfume, and silent memories. There was a piano in the corner, covered by a white blanket, and child psychology books stacked next to a cracked glass lampshade. The walls still held paintings with golden frames, old photographs, scribbles of the twins in thin frames, all living together in a space that seemed to have been frozen in time. Carefully, Linda began to open the drawers. I separated yellowed papers, shopping receipts, notebooks with Caroline's notes about the boys, until, at the bottom of one of the dark wooden drawers, he found a worn envelope, with the flap sealed, but never sealed. It was dated August 1995. On the recipient, written in a curved and firm handwriting, "To Lorraine, somewhere that still listens to me." Linda's hands trembled. He sat down in the armchair, pulled the envelope close, and read slowly as if praying, "Dear Lorraine, you'll probably never see this letter, but I needed to write it. I need you to know that since the day my parents sent you away, my heart has never been the same. I called out to you every night. I hid in my bedroom closet and cried softly, singing her song. That song, ours, the only one that made me sleep. I was just a girl, Lorraine, but today as an adult, I know I was a coward. I should have screamed. I should have stamped my feet. I should have held you by the hand and not let them tear you from me, like someone plucking a flower from its own garden. You were my mother when no one else was. And if one day I have children, I hope they know someone like you, someone who sings like you, someone who loves like you. With love and repentance, Caroline." Linda couldn't hold back her tears. The words pierced his chest like an arrow. It was as if Lorraine was standing there, sitting next to her, holding her hand and saying silently, "You came back for me." There, in that letter, never sent, was the confirmation of what Linda was already beginning to feel deep in her soul. It was not by chance. It was reparation. It was destiny. She hugged the envelope to her chest. For minutes, he said nothing. He just cried. The kind of crying that doesn't make noise but cleanses the soul. And if you've come this far, listening to this story with an open heart, maybe you've felt that too. This pain that is not yours, but that you carry. That call that has no explanation, but that screams inside. And sometimes all we need is a sign. This letter, it was hers. As she stood up, Linda heard a dry noise coming from the hallway. Heavy steps, doors opening, raised voices. It was Chapman speaking on the phone. "I told you, Jonathan, she's digging. It's messing with what was buried. And if she finds out everything..." Her voice was lost in the echo of the corridor. Linda held the letter tightly. That was no longer just a memory. It was proof. And a question began to form in his mind, as strong as the beating of his own heart. What, after all, they were hiding with so much fear? And why did Lorraine's name still seem to haunt those walls? The office was plunged into an inconspicuous gloom when Linda entered. The tall windows let the late afternoon light through the curtains with difficulty, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. Richard Alcott was on his back, staring at the screen of a lit notebook, his brow furrowed and his shoulders tense. He didn't turn when he heard her enter. He just said dryly, "I asked not to be interrupted now." Linda approached slowly, holding the old envelope in her hands, crumpled by the many times she had pressed it to her chest since she had found it. "I know, but that can no longer wait." Richard spun his chair slowly, staring at her with tired eyes. The silence between the two was filled only by the ticking of the wall clock. Linda, even though she was trembling inside, stood firm. "I found that," he said, handing the letter. "It is dated 1995. It was written by Caroline to Lorraine." Richard read it silently. With each line, his expression became more closed. When he finished, he rested the letter on the table with the delicacy of someone who manipulates dynamite. "I know who Lorraine was," he said finally. "She worked here." Then he disappeared. Linda took a deep breath. "Lorraine was my grandmother." He stared at her for long seconds, as if trying to find a lie on her face. "And you came here for money? Of recognition? Is this all about inheritance?" The sentence pierced Linda like a blade. She stiffened, but did not lower her eyes. "I came here by chance, or maybe not. I came to clean the floor, and now I find myself cleaning wounds that no one had the courage to face." Richard folded his arms. His voice hardened. "Beautiful. I don't believe in destiny, nor in spiritual poetry. This could all be a coincidence, a name repeated, a song that stuck in someone's head. Traumatized children sometimes cling to anything." Linda approached the table. Pain now gave way to firmness. "Coincidence does not return the voice of children who have spent years in silence. Coincidence doesn't make two orphan boys call a strange woman mommy without ever having heard that word before. Coincidence does not cross generations. What is happening here, Richard, is living memory, it's soul. For a moment, Richard hesitated, but soon he raised his voice. I can't afford to mix feelings with management. I'm facing a crisis. I need focus. Then get me out of the house, Linda replied, her eyes teary. Send me away. Do what your family has always done with mine. The words echoed through the office like an ancient sentence being repeated in the present. Richard was silent. He did not apologize. It didn't stop her. He just said, take a few days off. I need to think. Linda nodded. She picked up the letter carefully, but without looking at it again. He walked to the door with firm steps, as if accepting pain without running away from it. But before he crossed the corridor, he heard a rush coming from upstairs. Small, desperate steps. Screams. Beautiful mommy. Beautiful mommy. Ethan and Elijah staggered down the stairs, their eyes teary, their arms outstretched. They clung to her legs tightly. The eldest, in a hoarse voice, murmured, Don't go. He doesn't let us. Richard appeared behind, pale. That dismantled him from the inside. The children, he thought, were protected. They were pleading for someone who was not blood, but was soul. Linda knelt down, holding them both in her arms. He kissed their foreheads, swallowing their tears. I'll be back, my loves. But now, Mama Linda needs to breathe. She stood up. He looked at Richard one last time. He had teary eyes but remained silent. Pride or fear, you don't know. And then she left, through the front door, alone, with a letter in her purse and her heart full of voices that would never be silenced again. But something told him that this house still held too many truths behind its walls, and the biggest one, it was yet to explode. Linda's absence fell on the Alcott mansion like a winter veil that suffocates the light. The sound of the music disappeared. The corridors returned to being tunnels of heavy silence, and the twins, once discreetly vibrating with life around the cleaning lady, became statues of flesh again. Ethan refused to get out of bed. Elijah, his eyes fixed on the window, went hours without blinking, as if he expected to see a ghost walk through the garden and knock on the front door. At night, they shouted, they screamed without words, only sounds of raw pain, as if their small bodies no longer knew where to hide the trauma. The nanny, not knowing what to do, called doctors, therapists, healers. Nothing had any effect. They didn't eat, they did not sleep, and they no longer wanted to live in that enforced silence. Chapman, irritated by the chaos, entered Richard's office with an air of urgency. He said that was unsustainable, that the only solution was a private clinic in Boston, specializing in children's emotional disorders. Your children are regressing, Mr. Alcott. They are dangerously vulnerable. They need restraint, control. But Richard, for the first time in weeks, did not respond. He was sitting in front of the library's old TV, surrounded by boxes of tapes, DVDs, and family albums. On the screen, old images rotated slowly. Caroline, still alive, still full of laughter, rocked the newborn boys. One of them cried softly on his lap, and she tenderly sang, "Swing low, sweet chariot." The song has gone through the years like a hot knife, cutting through a wound that has never healed. Richard pressed the pause button, returned. He heard it again. He closed his eyes. The timbre, the cadence, the way she pronounced, "Come in for to carry me home." It was identical, not alike, identical. Linda sang the same way, the same softness, the same intention, as if it were Caroline herself, returning to the house through another woman. He took a deep breath. He looked at the letter left on the table. Caroline had written, "If I ever have children, I want them to meet someone like you." Those words, once read with skepticism, now seemed to echo with divine force. Perhaps Caroline was not talking about a symbolic wish. Perhaps he was somehow asking Lorraine, or someone in her bloodline, to return to finish what fate had interrupted. In the kitchen, Elijah would knock over the plate of food and hide under the table. Ethan banged his fists on the wall, trying to find a sound that would fill the void. Employees no longer knew how to act. Chapman, upset, threatened to fire the nanny. "If she can't control 2 children, why is she here?" he shouted. But the woman, her eyes red with concern, replied in a choked voice, "They don't need to be controlled. They need to be heard." That morning, Richard did not sleep. He walked all over the house as if he were stepping into a minefield. In each room, an echo of the past. In Caroline's room, the perfume still seemed suspended in the air. In the closet, he found a scarf of hers that he never had the courage to donate. He pressed it to his face and cried like he had never cried before, without restraint, without shame, without words. The pain, which for years he had believed to be manageable, now exploded in waves. The pain of not having listened to his children, for having closed his eyes to what was invisible to the rich, for having doubted the impossible. At dawn, he came down the stairs like a man who resurrects with a new purpose. He walked to the kitchen, where the boys were huddled in a corner, hugging. He sat on the ground in front of them. Ethan looked at him with teary eyes and murmured, as if pleading, "Linda." It was enough. Without answering anything, Richard got up, took the car keys and left without saying where he was going. Chapman called to him, tried to follow him, but he didn't look back. He needed to find her. "I had to say that I was wrong, that she wasn't just a cleaning lady, that she was the answer he spent his whole life pretending he didn't need, the woman that fate planted in that house as a seed of healing." And there, at the wheel of the car, crossing the road from Greenwich to the Bronx, Richard felt for the first time in a long time that perhaps there was a chance of salvation. But one question followed him like an uncomfortable whisper. What if he had already arrived too late? The noise of the street in the Bronx was different. There was no silence between the broken sidewalks and the flickering lampposts. There were voices, horns, childish screams, the smell of sweet bread wafting from Latin bakeries, and life in its raw state. There, on the small block of Jerome Avenue, Linda had found a temporary refuge, a communal laundromat, where she spent her days folding sheets with the same care with which she folded her feelings. He worked in silence, as always, but inside, she carried a world of memories that still hurt her as if they were from yesterday. The touch of Elijah's small hands on his face, the whisper, "Mommy Linda," coming out of Ethan's mouth, Richard's startled look before sending her away. The front doorbell rang. Linda, with her blue laundry shirt glued to her body by the hot steam, didn't look. He thought it was another late customer looking for a last-minute jacket, but the silence of the man standing there made her look up. It was Richard, dressed in the same suit he wore on the day of his wife's funeral, downcast face but firm, empty hands but full of urgency. She stood still. The sheets slipped out of his hands. The steam from the machine hid half of his face, but she saw his eyes. They were red, but not with anger, of regret. "I came for you," he said, his voice breaking, "but not as a boss, as a father, as a man, like someone who made a mistake." Linda looked away. He took another sheet. He doubled in silence. "I'm not your employee, and I don't need your charity." Richard took a deep breath. He felt the weight of her words. He got one step closer, then another, until she knelt on the laundry floor, between baskets of dirty clothes and the aroma of laundry detergent. "I watched the video. Caroline singing to the boys. It was you. The voice was his. They're not hungry, Linda. They miss it. They are missing you so much." She stopped. He squeezed the sheet tightly. The tears were already there, but they still didn't fall. "It's not for me that you have to come back. It is for them." That cold ground, that gesture of humility, that confession, they dismantled something inside it. Linda didn't say yes. He just dropped the sheet and walked to the locker room. When he returned, he had his bag on his shoulders. The way back to Greenwich was in silence. Richard drove with trembling hands. He looked in the rearview mirror every 5 minutes, as if he feared she would disappear. Linda kept her eyes fixed on the road, as if preparing to cross a territory of pain. When they arrived at the mansion, it was night. The house was lit, but lifeless. As soon as the door opened, two sounds echoed down the stairs, the sound of small footsteps running and a scream. "Beautiful!" Ethan and Elijah came down like lightning. They threw themselves into her arms. They cried, laughed, spoke disconnected words, but among all, one was repeated. "Mommy, Mommy, Mom!" Linda knelt on the ground. He embraced them both with arms that seemed fragile, but that carried the strength of generations. He cried with them. And there, in that embrace, something healed. Chapman, standing at the top of the stairs, watched in silence. He said nothing, but her hardened eyes did not hide her discomfort. Richard got down slowly, stood next to Linda, and without touching her, said only, "Welcome back." Linda did not answer, but she remained there on the cold floor of the richest mansion in Greenwich, surrounded by true love. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because there are pains that only find healing when they are seen. But what Linda didn't know yet, it was that the true healing of that house depended on a secret that still slept, hidden in a corner that no one dared to open. And when that door was knocked, the truth would burst like thunder in the middle of the night. The mansion breathed differently that night. The air seemed less dense, as if the walls, for so many years suffocated in silence, had finally allowed life to circulate again among its corridors. Ethan and Elijah, now hugging toys they had long forgotten, laughed softly on the living room carpet as Linda watched them sit on the floor, like a mother who is reunited with her children after a long exile. The scene was sweet, but not everything there was peaceful. Richard, standing in the doorway, held a glass of whiskey that trembled slightly between his fingers. He knew there was more behind it all. Linda's return seemed to have turned on a light, but this light also revealed old shadows, and Linda felt it too, a nuisance, as if a glance followed her at every step inside the house, and she knew where she came from, Mrs. Chapman. The next morning, as the boys drew in the sun from the porch, Linda entered the house's mailroom, a small room with dark wood cabinets and hundreds of envelopes arranged by dates. It was where all the old letters of the Alcott family were kept, even the ones that were never sent. While organizing the boxes in alphabetical order, his eyes found a yellowish, unstamped envelope hidden among the back of a drawer. The lyrics were familiar. Linda pulled him carefully. The sender read, "Caroline Alcott. Recipient, Lorraine Coleman." Linda's heart raced. She unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a letter written by Caroline, dated 1998. "Dear Lorraine, not a day went by that I didn't cry for his absence. They said you left of your own free will, but I know they lied. I overheard my mother arguing with Chapman. She said you were meddling too much. I was just a girl, but I understood. They sent you away because they loved you more than me. I tried to write before, but Chapman said there was no way I could find you. So I leave this letter here in the hope that one day it will reach you. With love always, Caroline." Linda pressed the paper to her chest, the name of his grandmother Lorraine written there, as an echo of the truth that had been buried. She already knew what she needed to do. At night, he waited for the house to fall silent. He went to Richard's office. He was reading a book, his glasses hanging from the tip of his nose. "I need to show you something," she said firmly. Richard looked up. Linda placed the letter on the table. He read it silently. With each line, his eyes became denser. "Chapman prevented this letter from being sent," Linda said, her voice low. "Caroline wanted to meet my grandmother again, but someone stopped her." As if invoked by name, Mrs. Chapman appeared at the door. "This is absurd," she said, her face cold. "This woman is poking around where she shouldn't." Linda stood up. "You knew everything, didn't you?" Chapman folded his arms. "I did, yes, and I would do it all over again." The silence fell like thunder. "Caroline was being manipulated by that woman," Chapman continued. "Lorraine was a simple nanny, but he acted as if he were part of the family. She got in where she wasn't called, and now you're doing the same." Richard stood up slowly. Are you saying you hid this letter by choice? I protected this house, Chapman countered. These people, it does not belong to our world. It was like a blade. Linda, standing, motionless, felt the blood boiling in her veins. These people? Richard repeated in a low tone. Linda gave my children back their lives. It gave me back my sanity. And you dare to say that she does not belong in this house? I've been serving this family for 30 years, Chapman shouted. She's just a cleaning lady. Richard looked at Linda. Then he turned his eyes to Chapman. From now on, you don't serve anyone here anymore. She's fired. Chapman's face was fading. For the first time, his haughty posture gave way to panic. Richard, please, get out. Now. Chapman did not respond. It just spun on its heels and came out like a shadow pushed by the wind. Silence returned to the office. But it was another silence. A silence of relief. Linda sat up slowly. He took a deep breath. She destroyed a love bond, and almost destroyed another. Richard nodded. His eyes were teary. But now the story will be told as it should be. There are things that are hidden for years, but when they come to the surface, they heal much more than they hurt. And if you've been watching this far, know the most powerful moment in this story is yet to come. And when it arrives, you will understand that no true love is lost. Never. The next morning, Linda woke up to a letter slithering under her bedroom door, a white envelope without a sender. But inside it, there was something that would change everything, because what was written there, it would reveal the name of those who, in fact, hid more than letters. He hid lives. On that delicate sunny Sunday, the garden of the Alcott mansion looked different. The rose bushes had bloomed again, as if they felt that the house was now breathing peacefully. Ethan and Elijah ran among the flowers, laughing with their hands dirty with dirt, while Linda, sitting on the porch with the children's therapy book on her lap, watched them as if watching the miracle she planted with her own hands. The walls no longer seemed so high. The windows, previously locked from the inside, were now open, allowing the sound of life to enter. With Chapman's dismissal, an invisible weight had dissipated. The staff now treated Linda with respect, some even with admiration. She was no longer the invisible cleaning lady. She was the woman who rebuilt the heart of a broken family. And more than that, she was now the housekeeper-in-chief of the house. Richard made the invitation in person, in the same office where he had previously dismissed her. It's not a position, it's recognition, he said, with the sincerity she had never seen in men of that world. Linda accepted, but on one condition: she wanted to live in the house, not for the luxury, but for the routine. He wanted to be close to the boys, to take care of them with the same zeal that his grandmother Lorraine once dedicated to little Caroline. Her room was renovated. It was next to the twins. Simple, with a blue armchair, a hand-embroidered rug he had brought from the Bronx, and on the wall, a painting of the song "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," handwritten by the boys themselves. Ethan and Elijah now attended school with joy. On the first day of school, in front of the class, Ethan raised his hand and said, "I started talking again because of Mama Linda. She sang the song of our first mother, and that healed my heart." The teacher, moved, wrote that in a report sent to the school's psychologist. Weeks later, the case of the Alcott twins entered an academic paper as a rare example of transgenerational emotional healing. But for Linda, it wasn't science. It was love. It was faith. It was history. At night, after putting them to bed, she would go down to the living room and open her books on child psychology. He studied, took notes, reflected. He wanted to understand what he experienced. "I wanted to learn to help other children." Richard quietly supported her. She had an old room in the house renovated, transforming it into a small study library just for her. Sometimes he would appear at the door with 2 mugs of tea and sit next to her in silence. They talked little but looked at each other a lot, and in his eyes there was something new, admiration. On one of those nights, Linda commented, "Sometimes I think, how many other Lindas are there out there, invisible, erased, but with a gift inside their chest, waiting to be seen?" Richard only replied, "If the world had more eyes like yours, no one would go unnoticed." And it was there, between one book and another, that he approached with something else. A proposal that did not come with a contract nor a wax seal, but with a simple request. "Can we build something together, without haste?" Linda did not immediately respond. He just smiled, because deep down she knew they were already building. Meanwhile, in the Bronx, the community was filled with pride. The story of the cleaning lady who cured 2 millionaire boys had spread. TV programs, newspapers, documentaries. But Linda refused them all. He only agreed to give an interview to a community radio, and it was there that she said a phrase that moved thousands of listeners. "I didn't heal the boys alone. It was my grandmother's memory. It was the music. It was the love that never died. It was just waiting to be remembered." And in the midst of it all, there was something that was still on the horizon. Because as much as there was peace now, not all of the Alcott family's secrets had been revealed. One question still echoed in the depths of Linda's soul. Why, even so many years later, did that letter from Caroline never reach Lorraine? If Chapman had already died when the letter was written, someone else was involved, and the answer, dormant among old papers and forgotten archives, was about to surface, with a force no one could contain. The spring sun gently kissed the Greenwich Gardens, and that morning the Alcott mansion seemed to have been touched by a silent miracle. White and gold balloons swayed in the wind, hanging between the trees. Tables with flowered tablecloths spread across the lawn. It smelled of vanilla cake, freshly brewed tea, wildflowers. It was Ethan and Elijah's 7-year anniversary, and for the first time, the celebration wasn't a quiet formality, surrounded by cold faces. It was a lively party, full of voices, laughter, and hugs. Linda wore a simple light blue dress with discreet lace. In his eyes, the sparkle of someone who has gone through storms, and in his heart, the serenity of someone who knew he was exactly where he needed to be. Around her, people who knew her walk, neighbors from the Bronx, former cleaning colleagues, Mrs. Anita Reynolds, now with a cane but a full smile, the boys' teachers, and even distant family members of Lorraine who had never set foot in that house but were now welcomed as part of the family. Richard walked among the guests with a transformed countenance. He was no longer the inaccessible businessman, but a father who had relearned to love and to lose the fear of feeling. At one point, he climbed onto the small platform set up next to the cake table. With the microphone in his hands, he looked at Linda among the crowd. "I thought for a long time that this house needed silence to maintain order. What too much pain, it was better to be locked up. But I was wrong." He paused, taking a deep breath. "This house was cold. Now it's a home. And it was you, Linda, who turned on that light." Applause followed. Some excited, others shy, but all sincere. Linda lowered her gaze, embarrassed by so much recognition, but smiled. Not vanity, gratitude. In the middle of the party, when the balloons were already floating free and the children were running barefoot through the grass, a song began to play. The first notes were familiar. Ethan approached the small stage, holding a microphone. His eyes searched for Linda's. Beside him, Elijah shook his hand. "I want to sing a song that the Mother in Heaven sang to us, and that the Mother of the Earth sang too." His voice was fragile, but firm. And then the song began. "Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home." Ethan's voice was sweet, emotional. The words came out with tenderness, as if he understood every verse, every pain, every love contained therein. Elijah followed him in silence, moving his lips as if whispering to his heart. The guests were crying, some closed their eyes, others held the hands of those next to them, and beautiful. Linda was motionless. Tears ran unhurriedly down her face. She remembered her grandmother, sitting on the edge of the bed, combing her hair while murmuring the same song. He remembered the cold mornings in the Bronx, the laundry halls, the icy floor of the mansion that was now the floor of the house. And at that moment, in silence, she raised her eyes to the sky. Thank you, my God. I'm not special. I only heard what no one else heard, the silence of the children. And then he smiled. Because there, in that garden full of voices and memories, she knew that Lorraine was also present. Perhaps in the winds that blew the leaves, perhaps in the soft glow of the candles on the cake, or perhaps in the eyes of the boys who carried the sweetness of forgotten generations. But even surrounded by emotion, Linda felt that something still needed to be said, or rather, uncovered, because among the guests, a woman with grey hair, thin glasses and a navy blue dress watched everything from afar. He had a confused, almost uncomfortable expression, as if he recognized something but could not name it. And when this woman's eyes crossed Linda's, there was a silence. A silence that did not come from the absence of sound, but from the presence of a presentiment. Who was that woman, and what did she know about Lorraine that even Linda hasn't figured out yet? Afternoon light pierced the stained glass windows sweetly, tinting the halls of the Alcott mansion with shades of gold and hope. Where silence once reigned, there were now voices, laughs, light steps of children who were no longer afraid. Linda walked slowly, observing the home she helped to be reborn. She was no longer the invisible cleaning lady with a downcast gaze. Now she was presence. She was a living memory. She was a root, planted where they said she would never create shadow. Ethan and Elijah ran toward her with open arms and shining eyes. They embraced it with the strength of those who recognize love in its purest form. In the background, the fireplace crackled, warming more than the body, warming the past, forgiveness, history. On the shelf, 2 photos side by side, the old one of Lorraine and Caroline finely framed with honor, and the new one of Linda with the twins, smiling as if she had survived the impossible. And when her voice echoed, it was like a whisper of faith in the heart of those who listen. Life has made me lose a lot, but God saved the best for last. Because sometimes we are not born mothers, but we are chosen to be. This story reminds us that there are pains that the world ignores, but that love, when true, hears even in silence. And if there is something that crosses time, loss, and prejudice, it is the strength of a heart willing to care. If you've made it this far, thank you for feeling along with us. Your like is like a hug that warms up and supports our channel. Your registration is an affectionate invitation to come back to the next cafe, because here there is always another story waiting for you. Right here in the comments of where you are watching. Let's build this community with love, from city to city. And it activates the bell so you don't lose it when the coffee is ironed again. Because believe me, there are still many stories of women like Linda, humble, strong, invisible, waiting to be told. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.